It begins in silence. Not the kind of silence you find in the stillness of dawn, but an absence that feels unnatural, hollow, and wrong. Imagine standing at the shore of a vast lake one evening, the moon reflecting on its surface like liquid silver. You go to sleep with that image burned into your mind, only to wake the next day and find the water gone. Not receded, not dried in the slow patience of time. Gone, vanished, as if swallowed by something that refuses to leave a trace. The exposed lakebed stretches before you like a graveyard of memories, fish skeletons scattered like ancient relics, boats marooned in cracked mud, and the air heavy with the faint stench of decay. All across our planet, from Siberia to South America, lakes are disappearing, sometimes in a matter of months, sometimes overnight, leaving behind desolate scars on the land. The official explanations come easily: climate change, shifting tectonic plates, diverted rivers, overuse of water. But when you stand at the edge of one of these empty basins and feel the strange, unshakable sensation that you're being watched, those explanations begin to feel incomplete. There are stories whispered by locals that speak of shapes seen beneath the water in the days before it vanished, of unnatural tremors that ripple through the ground at night, of eerie sounds that rise from the deep just before the waters drain away. Scientists, governments, and environmental agencies file their reports, publish their graphs, and move on. But in the shadows, other voices claim the truth runs deeper, that the disappearance of these lakes may be part of a pattern older than humanity itself. These voices tell of ancient maps marking bodies of water that existed for centuries, and then simply ceased to be, long before modern industry could be blamed. They point to myths in which lakes are swallowed by unseen mouths, myths that ex-sun, Eastern cultures separated by oceans, yet eerily similar in detail. In the years I've spent tracking these vanishing waters, I've learned that their stories are not only written in the sediment or in the data of satellites. They're written in the eyes of the people who have seen them vanish, in the trembling voices that describe the strange lights hovering over the surface before the final night, and in the way locals avoid certain dry lakebeds as if they still hold something dangerous. Tonight, we start following these traces, not to explain them away, but to uncover the possibility that something unseen, something ancient, is reclaiming these waters. And if it is, the question is not why, but when it will happen again. If the vanishing of lakes were purely random, the story might be easier to accept. Nature, after all, thrives on chaos. Storms, droughts, floods, earthquakes. But what I began to notice, tracing these events across continents and decades, was a rhythm. Lakes separated by oceans were disappearing under circumstances so alike, it was as if an unseen hand was drawing the same signature on different parts of the earth. It always begins quietly. No warning from satellites, no official advisories, just a strange stillness in the water days before the end. Locals describe it as if the lake becomes listless, currents slow, wildlife retreats, and sometimes the surface develops a glassy sheen that refuses to ripple, even in wind. Take Lake Beloye in Russia. It had endured centuries of storms and seasonal freezes, yet one summer, it emptied almost entirely in the span of hours. Witnesses claim to have heard a low, almost subterranean hum in the night preceding the event, a vibration that rattled windows but left no trace in seismographic records. Thousands of kilometers away in Chile, Laguna de Aculeo met a similar fate. Farmers woke to find the once lively water reduced to a cracked wasteland. In both cases, officials blamed climate shifts and overuse of water, but the timeline didn't match. Something acted far faster than evaporation or human consumption ever could. Even stranger are the accounts from those who claim to have been near the lakes at their final moments. One man in Kazakhstan spoke of seeing shadows beneath the surface, shadows that didn't move like fish, but swirled in deliberate patterns, circling as if marking territory. In Canada, an elderly woman swore she saw what looked like faint light spiraling downward in the center of a lake minutes before it drained. She was dismissed as confused, but her story echoes reports from as far back as the 1700s, when European explorers described luminous whirls over vanishing lakes in Africa. These parallels aren't coincidences. They are fragments of a pattern, one that doesn't care about geography, climate, or politics. And if the pattern is real, then so is the possibility that something with intention, something vast, hidden, and patient, is behind it. But patterns can be dangerous to follow. The deeper you trace them, the more they start tracing you back. And as I would soon discover, looking into the mystery of Earth's vanishing lakes means staring into a darkness that might not be content to let you go. For every lake that vanishes suddenly, there are whispers that it tried to warn those who lived nearby. But these warnings are never in the form of clear signs. They are subtle, almost imperceptible, until you look back and realize they were there all along. Sometimes the water begins to change color, not in the gradual way of algae blooms, but in sudden, uneven patches, as if the lake itself were bruising. Other times, strange scents rise from its depths, metallic, acrid, or like rotting vegetation, even when the surrounding land remains green and thriving. In Patagonia, a small glacial lake turned an unnatural shade of deep crimson just days before it drained completely. Scientists attributed it to a sudden influx of iron-rich sediment, yet the fishermen who lived there swore they saw no such sediment washing in from the surrounding streams. They described the color as bleeding from below, as though something deep beneath the waterline had been disturbed and was seeping upward. In Central Asia, locals around a disappearing lake told of flocks of birds abandoning the area, leaving behind nests still filled with unhatched eggs. It's a detail that shows up again and again in other locations, yet is rarely mentioned in official accounts. Then there are the sounds. Those who've heard them say they are almost impossible to describe. Low vibrations that seem to come not from the surface, but from deep within the earth, as if the planet itself is exhaling. The hum may last for minutes or hours, sometimes accompanied by a faint resonance that seems to settle in the bones rather than the ears. And yet, when measured, the sound doesn't register on standard audio equipment, leaving no proof beyond the trembling accounts of those who experienced it. What makes these warnings so unsettling is not just their strangeness, but their consistency across cultures and continents. People who have never spoken to each other, who live thousands of miles apart, describe the same sensations, the same colors, the same noises, the same sudden retreat of life from the water. It is as if the lakes are alive in ways we do not understand, and in their final days, they are reacting to something, or perhaps they are trying to resist something. The idea is easy to dismiss until you start compiling these events side by side. When you do, the coincidences stop feeling coincidental. They start to look like a shared language, one that hints at the existence of forces beneath our feet and beneath our waters that we have barely begun to comprehend. And once you've noticed that language, it becomes impossible to ignore the question it raises. Who or what are the lakes speaking to? Some vanishings never make it into official reports. They happen in remote valleys, far from satellite eyes and scientific expeditions, leaving only the memories of the few who witnessed them. These are the disappearances that haunt me the most, because they leave nothing, not even the false comfort of an explanation. The lakes in these stories don't fade over years. They are there one day, gone the next, as if erased from existence. In the high plateaus of Mongolia, herders tell of a lake that had no name on any map, a place known only to those who grazed animals nearby. It was said to be unusually deep for its size, its water dark and cold even in summer. One spring morning, a young boy rode out to water his horse there, but found only a barren hollow littered with damp stones. His grandfather told him the lake had gone under, as if it had slipped beneath the earth to some hidden place. They did not go near it again. Months later, another herder claimed to hear splashing in the empty basin on a windless night, as though the water had returned. Yet in the morning, the ground was dry. In the Peruvian Andes, villagers remember a small turquoise lake that vanished during a storm. Witnesses insist that as the rain lashed the mountains, the water didn't overflow. It twisted downward, funneling into itself in a spiraling vortex before vanishing entirely. When the storm cleared, the lakebed was smooth, unmarked, and cold to the touch, as though the earth itself had sealed it shut. No geologists came to investigate. No government cared. The lake was never officially lost, because to the world, it had never officially existed. It is these unrecorded disappearances that suggest something far older than the modern narrative of climate change or human interference. When a body of water vanishes in silence, without cameras or witnesses, there is no need to explain it away with drought reports or geological surveys. It becomes a private event between the land and whatever force claims it. And the fact that these stories span centuries, long before the industrial age, raises a chilling question. Have we been mistaking an ancient cycle for a modern crisis? If so, then the lakes we see now are only temporary tenants in a world where water is borrowed, not owned. And if there is something, or someone, reclaiming that debt, then we have only begun to glimpse the scale of the force at work. Long before satellites traced the shape of our planet, long before explorers drew their imperfect coastlines and rivers, there were other maps, crafted not on paper, but on leather, clay, and stone. Some of these maps, hidden in museum archives or private collections, depict bodies of water that modern geography insists never existed. Others show familiar lakes in places where they have not been for centuries. But the most disturbing are the ones that chart lakes exactly where they should be, only to have those waters vanish in the centuries that follow, vanish in ways eerily similar to the disappearances we witness today. One such artifact, a weathered sheepskin map from the 1400s, found in a monastery in Armenia, depicts a perfectly round lake high in the Caucasus Mountains. No such lake exists now, yet local folklore remembers a circle of sky in the mountains that disappeared in a single night. The same map bears strange markings around the lake, spirals, lines radiating outward, symbols that resemble neither script nor decoration, but seem to indicate movement, perhaps even a direction of flow. Historians dismiss these as artistic flourishes, but when compared to indigenous carvings in North America showing spiraled lines above drying lake beds, the resemblance is undeniable. In West Africa, an ancient brass tablet holds the outline of a massive inland lake, where today there is only desert. Surrounding the lake's depiction are tiny etchings of creatures with elongated limbs, standing in water that comes to their waists. Anthropologists have called them stylized human figures, but locals tell a different story, of tall, silent beings who walked the waters and took them away. The accuracy of these maps in other geographical features, mountains, rivers, coastlines, suggests their creators knew the land well. If they could chart those elements with precision, why depict the lakes that should not be there? And why do some of those lakes vanish in the historical record at the same speed and in the same mysterious manner as the ones disappearing today? These artifacts hint at an unsettling truth, that the vanishing of lakes may be neither accident nor disaster, but part of a recurring process known to ancient civilizations and deliberately recorded, perhaps as warnings to those who would come after. If that is the case, then we are not the first to watch the waters disappear. The only difference is that those before us may have known the reason, and we, for all our science, are still in the dark. By now, you might be thinking these vanishings are nothing more than geological quirks, sinkholes, fractures in the bedrock, water diverted underground. That's the easy explanation, the one that lets you sleep at night. But what if the lakes aren't just draining away? What if they're being taken, not by human hands, but by something older, something we've mistaken for the background noise of the planet itself? Here's where it gets unsettling. In multiple accounts, spanning centuries and cultures, the final moments before a lake's disappearance are described not as a slow draining, but as a pulling, an invisible force drawing the water downward, as though a plug had been pulled at the center of the earth. Some say they've seen whirlpools form out of nowhere, spinning with unnatural precision, perfectly circular, and vanishing as soon as the water is gone. Others report flashes of pale light deep beneath the surface, followed by silence so heavy it presses against the chest. One story from a fisherman in Siberia haunts me the most. He claimed that as his boat sat in the still water, the surface suddenly sank beneath him, not rippled, not churned, sank, as if the entire lake had been a thin skin stretched over an empty space. He heard nothing but his own heartbeat as the shoreline raced toward him. Moments later, his boat sat stranded on wet, cracked ground. No splash, no sound of retreating water, just the sharp smell of something metallic in the air. He never went back. Now, here's my question for you, watching right now. If this is not nature, if these vanishings are part of something deliberate, something that selects when and where to strike, how many lakes have already disappeared without us knowing? How many more will vanish before we realize we're running out of time to understand why? I want you to pause for a moment. Think about your own part of the world. Is this a lake, a pond, a reservoir you've known since childhood? Picture it gone. Just an empty scar in the ground where water once lived. Tell me in the comments, where is it, and what would it mean if it vanished tomorrow? Because the deeper we go into this, the more one truth becomes inescapable. These vanishings may not be random at all. They may be the sign of something far bigger, far more coordinated than we have dared to imagine. And if that's true, we might already be in its pattern. Beneath every lake lies a world we rarely think about. A hidden network of rock, sediment, and ancient waterways carved long before humans kept records. Most of these channels are harmless, formed by natural erosion over thousands of years. But some are different. They are unnaturally smooth, twisting downward into the dark in ways that defy the slow patience of geology, as though shaped with intent. Explorers who have dared to descend into the drained basins of vanished lakes have found these openings, perfectly rounded shafts vanishing into blackness, their walls marked with strange parallel grooves. In the 1980s, a research team in Central Asia attempted to map one such shaft left behind after a sudden lake disappearance. Their submersible camera descended for over 200 meters before the feed abruptly cut out. When they pulled the cable back, the camera housing was warped, as if exposed to intense heat, though the surrounding water had been icy cold. Officially, the expedition's findings were never released. Unofficially, one of the team members later claimed that just before the feed died, the camera recorded something moving in the darkness, something that reflected light in a way no rock or sediment could. There are other accounts, scattered and incomplete, from cavers in South America, divers in Eastern Europe, and even military engineers in North America. Each describes underground spaces far larger than the lakes above them, as if the water had been resting atop an empty cathedral carved into the earth. In some cases, they found signs that water had once filled these voids to the ceiling, but had receded, leaving behind mineral stains high on the walls. The implication is chilling. If the water is going somewhere, it may not simply be dispersing into soil or rock. It may be entering vast hidden chambers, sealed away from the surface world. Some indigenous Aos legends speak of these spaces as the sleeping places of the earth, where water retreats to rest before returning. Others are far darker, warning that once the water goes down, something else may come up. Whether these tales are metaphor or memory is unclear, but the fact remains. Beneath the surface, there exists a labyrinth of passages and hollowed chambers whose size and purpose we have barely begun to understand. And if these pathways are part of the reason lakes vanish, then the true mystery isn't just where the water is going, but what might be waiting for it there. We speak so often of lakes disappearing that we forget the stories where they come back, but they do not return the same. In some places, years after a lake has been declared gone forever, the basin will suddenly refill, as if the earth has changed its mind. At first, it seems like a miracle, a sign of renewal, But those who live near such lakes rarely greet the water with joy. They know what came back is not what left. In a valley in northern China, a vanished lake returned after more than 2 decades. Locals noticed immediately that the water had an oily sheen, reflecting light in a strange, rainbow-like shimmer. Fish introduced to the lake died within days, their bodies bloated and pale. The few animals that drank from it grew sick, their fur falling out in clumps. Scientists blamed contamination from underground mineral deposits, but they could not explain how the deposits had appeared so suddenly in a region without known reserves. In South America, a lake that vanished in the 1970s reappeared in the late 1990s. Its waters were darker than before, and divers reported an unnatural stillness below the surface, as if the water itself resisted being disturbed. One diver claimed he felt something move past him in the gloom, something enormous, without a sound or ripple. He surfaced in a panic, refusing to dive there again. And there are the lakes that come back only briefly. In the deserts of Central Asia, nomads tell of shallow depressions that fill overnight after heavy rain, but the water drains away within hours, leaving behind strange, symmetrical patterns etched into the mud. They call these the marks of the thirsty ones. The unsettling truth is that the return of a lake is not the end of its story. If anything, it might be the continuation of something we do not yet understand. The water that comes back may not be the same water that left. It may have traveled through places beyond our reach, absorbed elements or energies we cannot measure. And if that is the case, then perhaps the vanishing of lakes is not a loss at all, but a transformation, a cycle whose purpose remains hidden from us. But cycles have intent. And if something is sending the water away and then letting it return altered, the question becomes, why? Is the change a byproduct? Or the point? If the vanishing of lakes were only a matter of water leaving, the story would already be strange enough. But there are places where the disappearance seems to bring something else with it, something that remains after the water is gone. Travelers speak of a heaviness in the air around empty basins, a distortion in sound where voices carry strangely, as if the space itself were listening. Some say the wind moves differently there, spiraling in slow, deliberate currents that make the hair on the back of the neck rise. In Alaska, a drained lake left behind a hollow where compasses spun erratically, refusing to settle. Scientists attributed the anomaly to magnetic minerals in the exposed soil, but the effect persisted for years, long after any reasonable explanation should have faded. Local hunters avoided the place entirely, warning that the ground remembers. In another case, a dry lakebed in Eastern Europe became a site of repeated electrical storms, bolts of lightning striking the same points over and over with unerring accuracy. No one could explain why those points glowed faintly at night, visible even under a clouded sky. There are more personal stories too. Accounts of people who spent time near these vanished waters and later claimed to feel pulled back to them, as though some part of their mind had been left behind. A geologist in South America visited a dry basin to collect soil samples. Weeks later, she began dreaming of standing in water up to her chest, unable to see the shore, something vast circling just beyond her vision. The dreams grew more vivid until she returned to the site, at which point they stopped abruptly. She refused to speak of what she felt there, but resigned her position within the month. These lingering effects suggest that the vanishing of lakes may not be the conclusion of an event, but the opening of one. The water's absence leave, as behind a space not just physical, but energetic, a kind of wound in the landscape that interacts with the living in ways we don't yet understand. And if these places are capable of pulling the mind, bending instruments, and altering weather, then perhaps the lakes are not victims at all. Perhaps they are participants in a process that extends beyond the boundaries of our reality, which leaves one last, unsettling possibility. The lakes are not gone. They are still here, just not in a form we can see. If the lakes are not truly gone, if they exist in some hidden form beyond our perception, then every disappearance becomes a message, one we have failed to understand. The problem is that we've been looking at them as static bodies of water, not as active participants in the deep systems of the Earth. What if the vanishings are not random tragedies, but deliberate signals? Patterns begin to emerge when you map them over decades. Disappearances cluster near fault lines, under migratory bird paths, alongside ancient burial sites, and in proximity to regions where strange lights have been reported for centuries. These are not coincidences. They are intersections, places where the boundaries between the familiar and the unknown grow thin. Some researchers, working far outside the safety of mainstream science, have suggested that the lakes are part of a planetary network, natural nodes that store and transfer not just water, but information. They believe the vanishings may be an exchange, a communication between the Earth and something beyond it. If true, then each drained basin is a letter sent out into the void, and the returning lakes are the replies. The danger is in assuming we are the intended recipients of these messages. If the conversation is not meant for us, then our attempts to interfere, damming rivers, pumping aquifers, redirecting flows, may be like shouting over a delicate transmission. And if the messages are warnings, then we may already have silenced some before they could reach their destination. So the next time you stand by a lake's edge, remember, what you see is not all that exists. That still, reflective surface might be a doorway. That quiet depth might be listening. And that vanishing shoreline might not be an accident, but the closing of a connection you were never meant to witness. Somewhere, even now, a lake may be draining, vanishing into the dark, carrying with it a truth we will never read. The question is, when it comes back, will it be the same, or will it bring something with it? If you've ever heard of a lake disappearing, or returning changed, share it below. Your story might be another piece of a pattern we're only beginning to see. And if you're near a lake right now, maybe keep an eye on the shoreline, just in case it decides to move.